Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we will add user authentication to our learning management system. Now, in Hasura's docs, it has Auth0 and Clerk as an authentication provider, which I tried for this project, but couldn't get them to work according to how I wanted. So that's why I'll be using Firebase. So the first thing we will do is in the data section, we will go to the users table because we have to make some small changes. Here in the Modify tab, we have field like name and role, in which we will change the default value. For the name field, we will add a default name called LearnItUser. And for the role field, we will remove the default value. Now let's add a new field in this table called Firebase_UID. This will store the UID created by Firebase when a new user is created, as its UID is not a UUID type which we can use in the ID field. And yes, these were all the changes we had to make. Now let's start implementing Firebase to our project by going to the Firebase website. I have an account on Firebase already, but we will start a new project. First, let's go to the console. Here, we will create a new project. Let's call it Learn It. I don't have much clue about this Google Analytics. It is recommended, so we will keep it. Let me fast forward until the project is done. And now we have our Firebase project. Let's now set it up in our Next.js project, which we will create in a sec. Let's copy this command, and I'll just create a Next.js project using create next app and come back. Alright, now that we have a fresh Next.js project, we can start to implement Firebase. But just an FYI, we are not currently starting on front-end styling currently. It's just to get the functionality. We will think about design later. So in the terminal, let's paste the command we copied earlier. And while Firebase is installing, we can start adding some files like a .env, which will hold our secret variables. Before we add the variables, let's set up Firebase. We take this code provided by Firebase and make a folder called lib for library in the src folder. Inside the lib folder, we create a firebase.js file and paste the code. Now I'll just quickly put these IDs and keys in the env file. And that's done. But for some reason, Firebase is still not installed. Let me try it again. And I'll add the process.env variables in the Firebase file. Now the variables are added and Firebase is installed. Next step is to add the sign-up page. And let me give you the idea I have for the front end. Basically, we will have a front page from where the user can go to the dashboard, which will be the main section of the website. And for that, first clear this home page. We can add a link to the dashboard page from here, using the link from next/link. And the dashboard will be on the route called Learn. Let's create this route by making a folder called Learn inside the app folder. And inside this folder, we create a page.js file. Inside, first start with a simple component layout and add a link to the sign-up page from here. Now that I think about it, it doesn't make sense to have the sign up inside the dashboard page, so let's add this sign up page and link it straight to the home page. Now let's create the sign up page, the same way we created the dashboard page. Here we will just add some simple styles and then add some simple inputs down so we can work on the functionality. First, we will add a button for sign up with Google, so the user has an option to just sign up with their Google account. But we will have to give the option to do simple sign up with email and password. So for that, we add an input for email and password with placeholders on each. Next, we will require some additional information from the user, like username and role. So for the username, we just use a normal text input. And for the role, we use a select element with options inside called student and teacher, so the user can select their role. After that, we create a button to submit this email and password to Firebase. Let's move on to Firebase, because we will have to set up authentication for the project there. In the build section, we have authentication. In this, we will set up both email password sign-up and Google sign-up. In the native provider, we have email/password option. Let's select it and save it. Next, we add a new provider. And from the additional providers, we select Google. Inside, just enable it and add a supporting email for it, then save. And now we have both sign-up options set up. Let's go back to VS Code. Here we first update the Firebase config file to export auth from it. And to do so, we first create a variable called auth, which we will get from useauth. And we import this useauth from Firebase/auth. Inside the useauth, we add the Firebase app. We're getting an error. Let me see what it is and get back to you. Okay, the issue was that it's not useauth, it's actually getAuth, so let's change it. Now let's export this auth variable. We will need it during signup. Finally, we go to the signup page. Let's start by adding the Google provider from Firebase/auth and create an instance of it. Next, we will add some states for the email and password, and their initial value will just be an empty string. The next state will be for the additional information, the username and role. And its initial value will be an object with username and role as keys with empty string as values. Now we have all the states. Let's start with a function to handle the Google signups. Inside, we use a method called signinWithPopup, which is provided by Firebase. In the params, we put the auth we are exporting from Firebase.js file and the Google provider we just created. This will return a user if signup is successful. So we use that then, which will have the result as a response. We will save the user data from the result in a variable. For now, we will just log the user to the console. If the signup was not successful, we will have a catch, which for now will just log the error as well. Now let's create another function. This one will be for the email and password signup. Here we use the createUserWithEmailPassword function from Firebase. In the params, we pass the auth, then the state email and password. And we use .then in it, just like the Google signup. We get the result, and for now log the user. After that, we add a .catch, which will log any errors. These functions are ready, but let's add a check function, which will check if all the required information is submitted or not. Here we will check if the additional info.username or additional info.role is an empty string or not. If either is an empty string, it will return true. Now let's place it at the beginning inside both of the signup function. We use an if statement. If the info check returns true, then console log that the required info is missing. And then we return here so the signup stops. Let's copy and paste this code in the email and password signup function as well. Let's add some scope values to the Google provider. We do provider.addScope, and in brackets, we put profile in the first one, and in the second one, we put email. Let's go to the inputs and set up the email and password state with them. In value, we place the email state, and in the onChange attribute, we put a function to update the email state every time the input value changes. And it's the same process in the password input as well for the password state. Now for the username and role. The function is not going to be the same, so we will have to create a separate function which we can use in both of these. We will call it handleAdditionalInfo. And this function will take two params. One is the key and the other is value. So first, we will create a new variable to store the data of the additional info state. Then we select the key of this object and give it the value as the param's value. For example, if the key is role and value is teacher, this will update the updated info.role to teacher. And then we just set this updated info variable as the state. Let's add the sign-up functions to their respective buttons on click event. Now in the select element, let's put the function in the onChange event. In the select element, we will give this function role as the first argument and event.target.value as the second. Now in the username input, we add the same function on the onChange event, and this time for the first argument, we give it username and e.target.value for the second. And this should be it. Let's test if all the functions are working correctly or not in the browser. Let's start a development server. You can see that Firebase has started correctly. Now, let's go to the sign-up page to check if it works. Looks like I forgot to make the sign-up page a client component. Let me fix that. Before we check, let's change the text color of the buttons, so they will be visible. Now, let's see by opening this sign-up page again if it works. Great, we can see all the inputs and buttons. Let's see if they work correctly. If we click on Sign Up with Google, nothing happens because of the info check function we added. In the console, we can see the message. So let's add a username and a role. Username can be Learnit and role can be teacher. Now if we check the Sign Up button again, the pop-up shows up as intended. And we are able to select a Google account. Let me select one and sign up. Now let's check the console if the user is logged or not. As you can see, we have the user object logged here, with all the details like name and email. Okay, but this is only half of the process, as we haven't added the user to Hasura. So to do that, we will add an API which will add the user to Hasura's user table. Let me just add the Hasura API endpoint and the admin secret in the env file and come back. Alright, so to make the API in Next.js, let's first create a folder called API in the app folder. Inside the API folder, we create a folder called Save User. Inside this Save User folder, we create a file called route.js. And here we will add the logic to save a new user. First, let's create and export an async function called post. In the arguments, we will receive the request. Now, inside the function, we will first take all the data we will receive from the request, which is a UID, username, email, and role by awaiting request.json. Next, we should put a check to see if all the values are present in the request or not, by using an if statement. And if either of the value is not present, then we will return a response saying, required data not found. We create a new response, and inside we add the message. After this object, we create another object, and inside we put the status code as 400, and in the header we put content type as application.json. After this check, we can start working on the actual logic to add user. So let's start with a try-catch syntax. Inside try, we do a fetch request to the Hasura API endpoint and save the response in a variable. We're getting the endpoint from our environment variable. After the URL route, we add an object. Inside it, we mention the method as post. Then the header, which will have the Hasura admin secret, which we will also get from the env file. Then we add the content type as application.json. After the header, we will add the body. Inside the body, we will add the query. And we can create the query or take it from Hasura itself. So let's go to Hasura. Here, let's go to the data section and inside the users table. Here at the top, we have try GraphQL. Click on it and select mutation. At the bottom, you can see the query we need to insert a new user. So let's copy that. Back in VS Code, we will add this query inside the body we were creating. After the query, we add the variables. These will be Firebase UID. We will receive it as UID from request, and username, email, and role, all from the request. Let me format the page. This is the fetch request. Now let's take the response from Hasura and send it to the front end. To do that, we first get the result from the response. After we have the result, we check if it has errors or not. So if errors exist, we log it to the console and we create a new response. Inside the response body, we will have a message and the error itself. After the body, we will add the status as 400 and in the header content type as application.json. Now that we've dealt with the error, let's send a response, and the message will be user created successfully. With the message, we also send the whole result. Then we add the status 200 and in header with the content type application.json. Now that we've sent the main response, let's also deal with the main catch and send a message then as well. This response will just have a message saying something went wrong, and we will send the 500 status code. And we will log the error here as well. This is all we needed to do for the route itself. Now all that is left is to implement it in the sign-up page and check it once. Let's go to the sign-up function, where we were logging the user from the result. Here we will fetch to the API we just created with the URL /API/SaveUser. First, we will add the method, which is post. Then the header with content type, application.json. After the header, we add the body. Inside the body, we will have the UID from the user object we got from the result. Then the username, which we will get from the additional info state. Then email from the user object. Finally, the role from the additional info state. This is what we need in the request. Now let's deal with the response. In the dot, then we will take the response we get from this request. First, we get the JSON out of it. After that, we can now log the data. Now let's add a .catch as well to catch any errors and log them for now. And we can copy and paste this code in the email sign-up function as well. Bear in mind that this is just to add the functionality. In the future, when we properly add the front end, some things might change, but the main logic will remain the same. Let's check this in the browser. Let's reload the page and start at the home page. Let's add the username and role. Now let me sign up and we can see. Let's check the console. And here you can see at the bottom, we have the user created successfully message. Let's also check on Hasura if the user was created there or not. And yes, the user is created here, so everything is working correctly. And that's it for the video. In the next video, we will work on setting up the custom claims on Firebase with Hasura, so that each user will have a proper JWT which they can use.